the very first time I did a presentation at an Agile conference was in 2003, I think it was, the XP conference. And just beforehand, I happened to notice that my fly was down. And I managed to correct for that before it got embarrassing. The good news these days is that that could be true now, and none of you will know. So, right, here we go. Right, now I'm actually going to give you a different talk, but it's the same content, if that makes any sense. Same content, just chopped up a bit differently, because what I want to tell you, I'm actually going to tell you where the bottleneck is. And you might not believe me to start with, and you might use different words to describe it, but the bottleneck in Agile teams is almost always in a different place to what you think, and it's actually surprisingly easy to handle. So I'll come to it in a minute, but where is it? That's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to save you a lot of hassle. You don't have to go off and find it, but I'm also going to tell you all the other stuff that will help you find it if it happens not to be there. So, all right, we start this here. The bottleneck, where is it? Okay, so I'm going to tell this kind of like a story where I'm the guide. You get to go back to work tomorrow, or get to dial into work tomorrow, and you get to be the guide for them. But in this story here, you're the heroes in this story, and I'm just going to show you some interesting stuff that I've stumbled on. Now, you know, I'm coming from New Zealand. I used to live in Scotland before that, Ireland. So I was away for 20 years. And when I came back, I looked it up on the map because I'd forgotten where it was. And it turns out that they've actually taken New Zealand off the map. And we're there, but kind of over here a little bit. I don't know why they do that, but if you go looking for maps of New Zealand, you'll find that the tourist board's taken them off because we got flooded by people looking for sheep and hobbits and stuff. Right, that's me, very handsome. It's funny what you can do when you pay a professional photographer to take your picture.
Clarke, I'm still on the first slide. I'm not sure if everybody else is, or if it's just mine that's been slow.
Is it not?
Same here, unfortunately.
Ah, right, that's interesting.
Showing the wrong screen.
Tell you what. I think no. I've got the screen I'm sharing here in front of me. Ah, right. So, it would have helped if you saw that map and the rest of it.
We're seeing the presenter view, not the slide.
There we go.
Okay, yeah. I've just switched into that. Does that change anything?
No.
Not for me.
It says that customers not engaged webinar.
Yeah, that's what it's called. Okay, what I'm going to do, I was going to draw on my iPad, so I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'm going to switch to Keynote. One of the delightful things when it works, and it normally does, is if you present from your iPad, you can actually draw on it as you go, and so it becomes a lot more engaging. But let's see if we can outwit this, and I'll stop sharing. Oh, hang on, I know what was going on. There's a message there. Hang on, we'll just come back here. Right, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
And hopefully you should see some dominoes now.
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
This goes to show that testing beforehand is a waste of time, because it right. Okay, we'll try again. And this will probably mess something else up. Yeah, now I can't see you guys, but that's okay. If anything happens, shout out, right? And pretend I'm drawing on the screen. Okay. So, we tell it as a story. There's New Zealand. See, there's no New Zealand on there, right? We covered that. If you haven't got a copy of the book, the Bottleneck Rules, go to share.toc.guide. And just download that for free. I give it away because I make my money from helping people solve their problems, and most people can solve their problems just by reading that book. Now, there's some books here, just so you see the list of them. I've got a new one coming out in February called Corkscrew Thinking, which will teach you how, if you're familiar with Ellie Goldratt, an easy way to use his probably his cleverest invention, the evaporating cloud. I've not dumbed it down, I've easied it up. And so it's a lot easier approach. It's the approach I use. It's a lot less formal, it's just really easy. That should be out shortly. Very small book, kind of like the Bottleneck Rules, but probably smaller. And what you'll learn in there is how Winston Churchill won World War I, and that's not a typo or a misspeak, how we won World War I by using the thinking style in here. It actually teaches a really clever thinking style that we all do. It's just that some people do it on harder stuff and some people give up. This helps you do it on harder stuff. Right, now this is going to give away the secret here. This is where the bottleneck is. It's your customer. In an Agile team, almost always, probably 90% of the time, you've spent an awful lot of time focusing on your Agile team. You look inside the team, and most people, when they go to look for the bottleneck, they look inside the team, like you would if you were going to look inside a factory and go, well, where's the slowest machine in the factory? What's slowing everything down? Where's the bottleneck? We tend to assume in Agile teams, if we're going to find a bottleneck, it'll be in the team. And there is a bottleneck inside the team, and it's almost always the testers. It should always be deliberately the developers. But when you take this bigger view and go, actually, hang on, we're operating as a business, it's our customer. They're not engaged. I'm going to show you at the end of this an easy way to help get them engaged. I hope it'll be kind of like at the end you go, oh, that was obvious. I hope at the moment you might be surprised as we go along though. So tell us a little bit of a story here. So the hero in this story that we're telling has a problem. And the problem is that the Agile team's customer isn't fully engaged. So now just imagine that we're all together, we're actually going to write a book, right? I'm going to set this up and we've got an Agile team that they're running really well. They've done a whole lot of stuff, and this is a pattern I'm sure you probably even see at work now. We've been seeing this for years and years and years and years. You've got the team, they're running, they're getting faster and faster and faster, but the customer, the person, the internal customer that feeds them can't keep up. So what that means, I've got some bullet points there, is that the team suffers a lot of delays. So you've got an Agile team, they're working away nice and busy here, but their customers doing two jobs. They're the head of marketing and day job, and then they're also supposed to help guide and steer this Agile team, and they're supposed to find time for that. And the urgency of the day job almost always takes over all of the spare space, and the team suffers. So they suffer delays because they want questions answered. So they go to the customer and say, oh, we need some help. And you go, okay, come and see me next Tuesday. I've got an hour. So what happens then is that the development team goes, okay, well, we can't get an answer for that. We'll just park that for the moment. And then we will go off and we'll start this one here. So they start multitasking, effectively diluting their effort, which is what we don't want, but it keeps people busy, and it keeps them busy while they're waiting. But whip goes up, and then when the customer and team do get time together, their meetings are always rushed because they've got so many things going on that they want cleared up, such a little window, and so corners get cut. And I don't know if you know GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. It was certainly something that 20, 30 years ago, that was a term we used. I don't know if people do these days so much. But the garbage in that comes into the team then causes rework, which has to be fixed, which also keeps us busy, which is kind of good. Good, like being busy, but it's doing rework that could often have been prevented. So what happens then is stuff takes a long time to deliver, and the customer feels like the team is sluggish. They're going, why does it take so long to get that stuff done? And they look and they go, oh, they're busy fixing stuff all the time. And they ask all these little questions and stuff. But you've got this kind of paradox here that the team is working really hard and getting faster and faster and faster. But they look like they're sluggish from the customer's point of view and from the CEO's point of view. And that's all because this team that started, running this fast has grown faster and faster and faster and faster, but the capacity to feed it hasn't gone up accordingly, or always never there. So the team has been working very, very, very hard. Feels kind of gutted, demotivated. They're working for a customer who can't find time for them. And although it's not deliberate, their motivation kind of, fades a little bit. They slow down a little bit, and it sucks. So it's a really, that this might be exaggerated. This might be, I'm not sure what the opposite of exaggerated is. Might be whatever the opposite of exaggerated is. It might even be worse in your place. But this gap between customer and team just gets worse and worse and worse the faster and better the Agile team gets. And that's because the front end is a bottleneck. So the team, they identify the villain in this. Remember, this is a story here. And the villain, they go, yes. And they go, the Agile team's customer isn't engaged. And what they keep doing, because they can't fix this problem, is that they keep getting faster and faster and faster, working on backlogs that haven't been properly curated or prioritized. Maybe they've often what you see is that the team who's demanding to be fed work, fuel, give us food. Imagine little birdies in a nest, and they're busy squawking, Mum, give us worms, and the customer's short of time. So often what they'll do is they'll find stuff that will keep the teams busy. They'll look down their backlog, and then they'll pick something from there and go, that requires a little bit of my effort, but it's several months worth of work for them, so we'll chuck it in, and that will stop the little birdies squawking. Okay, so now they incorrectly identify the villain as the customer, but it's not really the customer. It's just this is just a capacity problem, and that we are viewing IT as a silo who has an external customer, but the customer is actually really part of the team. So they meet a guide, which maybe tomorrow could be you. You go into work, you could point out, well, actually, no, this is just a fact. The customer is not actually a bad person. They just don't have enough time. And the problem is that at the front of your system is your system's bottleneck, which I tried my best to do Yoda speak there. So I'm not quite sure what that means. What it actually means is that the customer is your bottleneck. So bottleneck is funnel. That would be the bottleneck on the funnel, and it's deliberately at the bottom. It gives you a lot more control because it's wide up here. Don't spill stuff down here. It's the narrowest point of a flow system. See this little fella here? Turn that upside down, and the bottleneck's in the middle. You could go, if you wanted to, your time of day, and grab a bottle of wine, pour it out, watch the water flow. You'll see the bottleneck at the top of it. You could, if you wanted to, grab some Tabasco sauce and pour it out. Notice how they come out at a different speed. But the bottleneck in both of these cases is in a deliberate point. This surprises a lot of people, but the bottleneck, you're always going to have a bottleneck. So why not put it in the right place? The right place here for this little hourglass is right there. The right place for this one is here. But when you've got a customer who is the bottleneck, who doesn't have enough capacity, it's like flipping this upside down, and the bottleneck's at the top of the system, and you've got all these hungry people here who need to be kept busy. So your customer is almost certainly the bottleneck, and if not, you'll see stuff later that will help you, but just for now, it's quite likely that's you. The problem here is that you're not actually managing them as if they're a bottleneck. You're managing them as if they're an external customer who's outside the system. And it's funny because we call them the customer, but what they actually do is they supply us with requirements. So they're actually, the customer name is deceptive. We rely on them for inputs. They give us our raw materials. If you go out to a factory, you'll find that their raw materials, they don't buy raw materials from their customers. They buy them from their suppliers. So we've got an interesting situation here where we have the person that's the customer is also the supplier. Anyway, don't want to go into that too deep. Let me just get a little bit more concrete here. So the bottleneck is that the Agile team's customer isn't fully engaged. Now, that's kind of the wording that we'll often have. We'll say, oh, the customer's not engaged, or that they're too busy. If we translate this into sort of kind of just hard, black and white, logistical, mechanistic words, what we're saying is if they don't have enough time in a flow system, then they're the narrowest point. They are the bottleneck. Right. Now, I'm conscious with this, that this feels, for a lot of people, it feels really weird because we're just not used to thinking this way. And in fact, I've been doing this stuff since 1997, 96, 97. And I've only really, truly realized this in the last 3 years. And I kind of slapped myself on the forehead, but it's really, really, this is the situation. It's just that we use different words and we disguise the problem by saying a customer isn't engaged or that they're busy, when really it is they don't have enough capacity to feed the team. So,
question, Carl. You got quick time?
Yes.
Quick question, Carl. So we've got a question come in.
Cool.
What if your customer is really in a different team or you can't get to them?
Same thing. It's a capacity. So from a bottleneck point of view, what we're saying is that in terms of flow, the narrowest point, in terms of flow, we're talking about the narrowest point or the least capacity. So if they're outside, they're working in another team, they could actually even be working in another company. But if they're the person that's feeding you your inputs and steering you, if they're the person that's working through stuff, they're still the bottleneck. So what I'm going to show you here is that this stuff is generic principles for managing bottlenecks. And you can take the generic principles, and you'll like the stuff right at the end, and we can turn those into your own local solutions. Yeah. Cool.
If the customer's not engaged, Clarke, what about if the customer's not engaged or they don't see the value? What would you recommend there?
I would recommend that they wait till the end of this presentation because I'll cover that right at the end. Yep, that's exactly what I'm going to get to at the end. That this is what we're going to solve, and what you find is that it usually isn't, or it often isn't a motivation problem. It's a capacity problem. So we'll tackle it like that, and I promise I'll get that at the end. That's the exciting bit where you'll go, oh, that was obvious. Cool.
Thanks, Clarke.
Okay, no problem. Can you guys still see my screen here? I'm just going to go back into play mode. Yep. Good.
Yeah, we can still see it.
Good. So yeah, the problem with the screen, the reason that I went onto the iPad originally, and it's really good because you can draw on it, but it also means that you can have your iPad as one screen, whereas Keynote takes over both screens. So I can't see you guys back, which is most unfortunate. Anyway, okay, so moving on. So there's a bottle, just to clarify that this bottleneck is literally the neck of the bottle, the narrowest point. There's another one, and but there's a really good reason. That's a chili pepper sauce that you get here, kind of like Tabasco, but much nicer. Now the neck on that chili pepper is quite wide on the bottle on the outside, but it's actually very narrow in the middle. And the reason for that is that you want the chili sauce to come out in a nice controlled deliberate pace. So it's a deliberate bottleneck. And what you'll find is that these things here, and I'm just, let me emphasize this, they've deliberately got the bottleneck there, and on the bottle, they have them deliberately chosen so that they are in the right place, and it gives them a lot more control. Oops, and my funnel's just fallen off. Right, now I'm going to tell you a little story, and there's a joke in here, but just in case you don't get the joke bit, I'll point out where the funny bit is. And I may, if I remember, even ask you to come off mute for a moment and just laugh politely at the end. Might not do. So this is a story from the Bottleneck Rules. It's actually a real story, but I've kind of tidied it up and just told it, made it easier to understand. Took all the complicated reality out of it. And this happened several years ago, and it's just a nice little story about a team that were really struggling to keep up with work. They had far too much work, and I come along to the team, and the manager's name in real life was Elaine. In the book, I call her Eve. And we sit down, and she says, "Look, you're supposed to help me go faster, but honestly, everyone is working really, really, really hard. Everyone's working so busy," which in itself is actually a warning sign. If everyone's busy, then it's an indication that they're not managing the bottleneck. Because if you know about bottlenecks and you've identified your bottleneck, then the last thing you want to do is make everyone busy. So just have a look at this little thing here. You see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 whiteboards, and hopefully, because I've put a big red circle hint around it, you can see the build-up of work that's waiting in front of the bottleneck, which in this team was 2 testers of a team of about, I think, 16, 17, 18 people. So 2 testers, and the sign that gives away the bottleneck is you look for the queue of stuff that's building up behind it. Now, in simple sort of serial flow systems, that's really easy to do. If you've got lots of feedback loops and lots of rework and stuff, sometimes it can get hidden, but by rework, essentially. Iteration, like we do in Agile, getting feedback and adapting, isn't bad. In fact, it's very good, but feedback that you get that says, "Hey, look, this is wrong, fix it," and causes rework, often puts the bottleneck in the wrong place. So the very first thing you want to do is make sure that you're doing good engineering. But anyway, back to this guy here. So have a look at this little thing here we got. Okay, so we've got a big build-up of work in front of the testers. With these guys here, they've been in this situation for a long time. And for a couple of years, and they just said that they'd actually had to buy a 4th whiteboard because all the stickies wouldn't fit on 3. And the testers had actually taken their 4th whiteboard and they moved it to another part of the office because they didn't have space where they were. So we got them together, we got this view, and then I wandered around and I did my very best to prove my theory wrong, which was this. They don't know about bottlenecks. I'm pretty sure that's their bottleneck. But just in case, because I see bottlenecks and other people don't, I need to go and have a little bit of a wander around. And so I wandered around and it just, everything got back and just confirmed this is the bottleneck. And I'm sure if you looked at that board there, you'd look at it and go, "Oh, okay, why can't testing keep up?" And that's all you're trying to do. So I got the team together and I said to them, have I told you about the buffalo? Because the buffalo is this joke, you see, that explains bottlenecks in WIP. And it's moderately funny. So I'm going to switch over to that. And the buffalo story, it actually started out as a joke in Cheers, the TV program, except it didn't really. It was just an email that went around with a joke that said that that's what happened. So if you're old enough to remember Cheers, then you remember the character Cliff Clayton. Just imagine that he's telling this. So it's a bar, he's come in, he's got this wild, crazy story that's not really based on truth at all. he comes and says, well, you see, Norm's his best friend at the bar. Well, you see, Norm, it's like this. A herd of buffalo can only move as quickly as the slowest buffalo. And the slowest buffalo, well, they stay at the back, and the faster buffalo run in front of them, but at the slower speed. And if they didn't do that, the herd would split apart, like this. And then, when they were split apart, they would be prone to being attacked from all angles by wolves. Now just watch here. Hopefully 2 of them have just been attacked. I used to have sound effects for that. Now, evolution favored the herds that didn't spread apart. So these guys, they're tightly packed. Now, when these tightly packed herds were hunted, the wolves killed the slowest and the weakest buffalo, rather. And who were they? It was a guy at the back. And that made, paradoxically, the remaining herd stronger and faster. So you kill off grandma at the back, the whole herd runs faster. Right. I think that kind of makes sense. Now there's 2 sort of interesting facts in here. One that's useful for us as an analogy. One is that the bottleneck is the slowest buffalo, obviously. The other bit is that because they run together at the same speed, whip is limited. If they were wide apart, then whip would not be limited. You could measure whip as the amount of the distance between the first one, the one at the front and the one at the back. So we've got whip and we've got a bottleneck. Yeah, so doing that made the herd faster. And hopefully any moment, look at that. It took me 3 weeks, by the way, to do that animation. There you go. So they race along there. So by killing off grandma, the slowest buffalo, the bottleneck, we've made the herd faster. Now coming up, this is the joke bit. And I can't see you all because Keynote has taken over both of my screens. But could I ask you, if you're willing, to come off mute just for a few moments, and then when I get to the end of the day, just have a little laugh, just to make me happy. Right, here's the joke bit. I promise. I'll tell you when it's funny in case you miss it. So Cliff says, in much the same way, the human brain can only operate as quickly as the slowest brain cells. And now, as we know, excessive intake of alcohol kills off brain cells. You might see where this is going. Naturally, it attacks the slowest and the weakest brain cells first. I mean, this is just science, right? And in this way, regular consumption of beer eliminates the weaker brain cells, making the brain a faster and more efficient machine. And that, Norm, is why you always feel smarter after a few beers. Yay!
Hey!
Well done.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a point.
Yeah, from a beer, yeah.
A lot of questions always get answered during the presentation. I was going to ask what's the most common or funny joke about bottlenecks, so that's been answered now.
There we go. That's it. So that one there. Now, if you switch back to the whiteboard view that I showed you just a moment ago, whenever I show this, there's this really nice thing that happens. If you go and tell people about bottlenecks and they go nod, 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 what they do is that if you go, imagine if I just had this session, I got them all together and said, right, we've investigated all this and your bottleneck is the testers. And everyone would point at the testers and go, I knew it was you bastards. We've been saying that all along. It's your fault. And the testers would sit there and go, oh, like this. For some reason, and I've told this joke thousands, hundreds at least, possibly thousands of times now. And whenever I tell it, people laugh, have a little bit of a laugh. Then they look around and they go, oh. And then they look and go, who's our bottleneck? And then they go, oh, it's testers, isn't it? Yeah, it's you guys, yeah. And then someone almost always says, oh, we should feed you to the wolves. Then they have another little second laugh. And there's something about switching into that, just having a laugh mode that gets people working together and it helps them tackle this as a problem that's not personal. It's just saying that we have a bottleneck, it's a fact, and it happens to be these people. So now we've got to figure out how to manage them. And that, when you go on to the the customer isn't the villain, they're just the bottleneck. Now we have to figure out how to manage that. Moving into that mode's really, really helpful, because then we attack the problem, not the people. I have only once in the 20 years that I've been telling that joke, had someone say to me that the way to get their team faster was to give beer to the testers, which bewilders me because it's a brilliant idea, but it never happened. Right. And as we know, testers with beer. No, I was about to say something rude about testers. I'm not going to there. So we'll go back to our story, right? Luke's been off. They've identified the villain as actually the idea of a bottleneck, not Darth Vader. And now Yoda's saying, right, now we need a plan of attack. We know where the villain is. The villain is the bottleneck. So here's the plan of attack. And it's really simple, right? The first thing is, I'm going to teach you this in just a moment. Learn the focus formula. So the focus formula is a formula for focusing, and it took me 3 weeks, probably no, 3 days at least, to start with the word focus, because that's what theory constraints is about. It's about focusing. There's 100 million different things you could do. Where do we start? Where do we focus? So if you're looking at this, and that happened to be a metaphor for your team, you want to focus on that point there if you want to go faster. I'm not sure why you'd want to speed up time, but you could. Where's my funnel gone? Funnel, same thing. You want to focus there. There's no point making this stuff faster up here. You want to focus down there. So I spent a good 3 days when I figured out, while I was writing the Bottleneck Rules, that I needed a mnemonic. I needed a process. And focus is the word that describes TOC, theory of constraints. And I happened to come through, and I just realized that find was obviously the first step. So I had an F, and I go, oh, and this is known as a backronym, and I worked backwards and I filled it in, and I think I did a splendid job, and I'll explain that in a moment. But that's just step one. So you learn this formula, and then the second step is that the customer is the bottleneck, which they almost always are. Then you fix that just really quickly. Now, one of the problems with that bit, and I'll come to this in a little bit, is that us IT people, we've always been kind of like separate from the business, the bottleneck, the customer, and actually over the years we've spent so long fighting with them, we don't know how to collaborate with them. We've gotten really good at collaborating inside our team, but, and this is actually the essence to it, and it's the second C in focus, that this is the magic bit. We need to figure out how to collaborate with our bottleneck when they're outside the team. So we're good at collaborating inside. We need to figure out how to collaborate with the people outside the team better. In the past, that would have been, when it was done well, that was done by managers who were good at building bridges outside the team. That's one of the jobs of management, is to build bridges outside the team. And most people in the team don't ever see that. But nowadays we don't have so many managers, and so often this bit just gets put in the too hard basket. So I'm going to show you an easy way to do this. It's not perfect, but it's easy, and it gets things moving. And then once we've learned the focus formula, we're looking at, oh, hang on, the customer is a bottleneck. We're going to move to a U-shaped team, and I'll explain that just really briefly now. Here is. By the way, there's someone not on mute. If you could have just a little check and see if you're on mute or not, and just switch that off. I think someone's having dinner. So we've got this here, right? See that there? Imagine that there was a chart, a little chart here. And in fact, I would draw one if I could draw on my screen. But and it's got a U-shaped curve on it. So it starts here high, it's got a U-shape. And this side here, the Y-axis, measures capacity. remember, bottleneck's all about capacity. And this one here measures the steps that we go through to build software. And it's not actually the steps, it's the type of resource we have. So we might have customer here on the left, we'll have say analysts, UX people there, we'll have developers, and then we'll have testers, and then we'll have ops, then we'll have users on the far side of it. So imagine there's a U shape. The U shape is just saying that the lowest point of in terms of capacity, in other words, the bottleneck, we want it to be in a deliberate place, and we want to stack up capacity around it. And the place is development. So that there is a deliberate bottleneck. If this was an analogy for an agile team, you're going to have a bottleneck. You don't want it to be up here. You don't want it to be down here. You want it to be right bang smack in the middle, which is your developers. So that's the U-shaped team. And then once you've got it there, and this is the hardest bit, because often when people don't understand the idea of bottlenecks, it's particularly managers who come in, that they mistake productivity. They think you get productive by being busy. That's kind of true, but if you have a deliberate bottleneck, it means everyone else is not going to be busy. And I've had this happen a few times, and it's devastating when you get team to the perfect, most optimal U shape, and then someone will come in and they'll pop in efficiency measures, or they'll take people away going, actually, those BAs at the front, they're not busy enough. I'll take one of them and I'll pop them on another project. So the fourth step is that once you've got it to a U shape, you have to protect it. And then once you've got it there, you can do a whole lot of magic about the stuff that's coming in, and you can curate the work they work on and transform this into a nice money-making machine. Sorry, I just discovered something mucky on my screen there. There we go.
Just a quick question then, Clarke.
Yes, go for it.
How would you ever sell that? How do you sell the idea that you don't necessarily need everyone to be busy? Because if you've got someone that's paying the bills, trying to suggest that we don't actually want people to be busy all the time, it sounds like quite a hard sell.
It is, but what is actually missing for them? Actually, there's two bits to it. One is that you don't actually have to tell them the whole theory, right? You don't even have to tell them. Like if it's a customer, it's a bottleneck. Say it's a customer. You just have to make it easier for them to not be the bottleneck. But if you want, if you guys are struggling with something like that, get a free copy of this, send it to them, sit down, email me, and I'll give you some slides that you've got here, and just run them through stuff. The bit that's missing is understanding that the mental model says to be productive, everyone has to be busy. You need to move them away from that to be productive. You need to find your bottleneck, get it in the right place, protect it, and then manage it. And if you want to go 10% faster, you don't get everyone to work 10% faster. You figure out how to work together as a team so that the bottleneck, that one little narrow point, gets 10% faster. So it's an education thing. And it can be difficult for people because this is not obvious. It's really, really not obvious.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks, Clarke. Just got another one here actually. That's another one that's come in. I think this, so whoever wrote this wants it to be presented as a question. How do you know when the U is at the Goldilocks depth? So I assume that means like just right depth.
Just right depth. Not too hot, not too cold, not too hard, not too soft.
I assume that's what.
Yeah. So maybe if you can imagine that this is like a U-shaped thing, right? But it's got the bottleneck in the middle, and it is development. That becomes your rule. So there's some things that you'll know when it's not working. So if the bottleneck is upstream, in other words, if it's the customer or the analyst, there'll be some stuff that's happening. One is that your developers will be sitting there going, oh, they're not giving us enough work. They're not giving us enough work. They go, okay, cool. Oh, they're still not giving us enough work. And then they'll complain. And a manager will go and talk to those people, say, give them some work. And then depending on where it is, they'll either they'll look at their backlog and they go, what could we give them to keep them hungry? And they'll go from the top one. That might be the most important. Oh, but that's a lot of work for us to prepare. But it's only 2 days worth of work for the developers. And they'll go down, go down. And they get to the 19th one on the list and they go, oh, we got it here, guys. This only takes 2 days for us to prepare, keep them busy for 3 months. So that's one thing that will happen. And it's not obvious because that will look good. And they'll justify it by saying, hey, look, we needed to keep them busy. And it's still at the top of the backlog, right? It's still on the backlog. So it's clearly valuable. It's just not as valuable as the top bit. That's a good way to keep people busy. It's not a good way to make money. The other thing they'll do is that they will run through stuff and then they will hand stuff to the developers that's kind of half ready. It's half-assed. That they'll give it to the developers. Developers can then keep themselves busy, which is brilliant, working on it. And then when they finish it, they will show it to the testers, and the testers say, yeah, this looks all right. Oh, I've got a bunch of questions. They'll go back upstream and they go, oh, well, they'll demo it. And they go, oh, we don't like this. And then they'll cause change, and they'll ask to be changed. And in Agile, we call that iterative feedback. And we say that we're adapting and responding to change, and we're doing all these wonderful things. A lot of the time, that actually hides what's actually happening is that prep isn't being done properly upstream and rework is being caused. So those are two things. If it's testers who are on the other side and they don't have enough capacity to keep the developers working away, then what you'll see there is that the testers will either be doing half-hearted testing because they're under pressure to be busy, or there'll be a big delay between someone finishing something and then it being tested. So these things, you'll see them all around you. But if you were to look at it, the two questions that you want to ask is real Agile stuff. Am I getting good quality inputs into the, really well thought out, high quality inputs into the developers? Yes or no? And if it's no, then there's something wrong upstream. Am I getting fast feedback from the testers? Yes or no? Fast, high quality feedback from the testers? Yes or no? And if it's no, the bottleneck's probably downstream, and it's probably an N shape. And most teams are what I call N shape. They have far too many developers relative to the other roles.
Great, thanks, Clarke. Hopefully that answered your question. Whoever who asked that question. We'll move on now. If there's time at the end, we'll move on to a few more questions. I'll let you continue, Clarke.
Right, let me show you this focus formula. Right. So focus. Right. There you go. I've shown it to you. So you got a bottleneck, right? Somewhere in your team, you have a bottleneck. And if not in your team, you go, well, actually, no, we don't have enough work to do. Then as part of the bigger system, you have a bottleneck somewhere. So you've got to find it. That's the first step. Easiest way to find it is to make sure that you draw a circle on a screen, on a piece of paper, or on a screen if you want to, or grab a wall, grab some stickies, just map out the different resource types you have involved in your work, and then just run through and run a thought experiment going. If we had more of that type, would we get more done? No, because that one wouldn't be able to keep up. Okay, that's one easy way to find it. Another easy way is to look, say it's a traffic system, for instance. You look for the big buildup of traffic. If you have nice Kanban, Scrum boards, whatever you want to call them. You look and go, oh, where's the big buildup of stickies? Oh, there it is. Okay, that's interesting. If you have a cumulative flow diagram and you've got it there, you see, oh, hang on, yeah, there's a big buildup of stuff there. You look in Agile lean terms, you look for WIP. And the WIP, where it's building up, bottleneck's probably after that. The easiest way if you're in Agile to find it is just to go, look, if it's not the developers, and there'll be symptoms I've just described that tell you about those, it's not the developers, then it's inside the team. It's almost certainly the testers. And then if you take that bigger view, which you should, go, it's not them. It's not. Where is it outside? It's probably the customers. So finding it's actually quite straightforward. It just doesn't seem that way because it's not something you've had to do before. Right. So find it and then optimize. Often you'll find that the busiest person, that they know they're the bottleneck, and they're naturally optimizing anyway. In some cases, you'll find that optimizing, just looking at the bottleneck, let me just add a little bit here, there. If you look at the bottleneck, find and optimize apply to the bottleneck. Optimize, if you look at it, and you go, okay, optimize, all right. How can we look at these guys and help them get faster? So with the whiteboard example, we looked at the testers, 2 testers, how do you make them go faster? They were all really efficient, but they managed to find one meeting that they could maybe cancel that gave them a bit of extra time. Now, the 3 C's are just magic, and it's all about what TOC and Agile are all about. So you've got coordinate, which is just coordination things. For instance, I'll give you an example of a coordination thing. Our school behind me here, with the kids on a rainy day, they used to find that at 3:15 when the kids got out of school, the road outside would be full up with traffic, and it would just cause, it'd be a bottleneck. It would cause the entire area to freeze up for those 20 minutes as parents went to pick up their kids on a rainy day. So clever coordination solution. What the school did is that they cut the younger kids' lunch break down to be 15 minutes on a rainy day, and they let them leave 20 minutes earlier. So they doubled the window for parents picking up. And that, rather cleverly, got rid of this big sudden splurge of cars arriving, and the bottleneck and the traffic system went away. Lots of really clever things you can do with coordination. The beauty with this stuff here is, as I'm just sort of categorizing it, and it just helps you think about how could we coordinate differently. Collaboration is how can we help? So we've got all these non-bottlenecks, how can they help? Collaboration is the essence of Agile, and what we need to do when the customer is the bottleneck is figure out how to collaborate with them outside the team. And I'm going to show you that in just a moment, a way to do that gets a lot easier. Now, curate is like with a museum, you have a curator who says, hey, look, we've got this limited floor space out there, but we've got these huge stockpiles of stuff we could put out there. So my job as curator is to carefully choose the stuff that we'll put in our most precious limited space. So it's a bottleneck problem. And we do curation here, looking at the work that comes in to our teams. And that's actually where I think that the magic in the future will come from once we've all got our Agile teams up and running. Upgrade is just basically like, when your PC is running too slow and you go, oh, I need a new PC. And you might have 2 levels of that. One is, actually, have I just got upgraded my memory or upgraded from a hard disk to an SSD? It'll go faster, right? Or the other extreme, more expensive is, I think I need to actually buy a new PC. And then start again. The S is just, basically your bottleneck's going to move if you keep increasing its capacity. So you have to start again. But the magic word on this is that you do it strategically. You don't just wait for it to happen and then react. You figure out, where do I want my bottleneck to actually be? And then you move it there deliberately and strategically. just like with this guy here, where that is a deliberate bottleneck. Right, now, for some reason, my slides have just let me down. So I'm going to wander down here and I'm going to come back to Yoda. Okay, so Yoda says, in fact, I'm just going to keep it in that mode just for the moment, because I can't draw on this. I'm just going to say, Yoda says, so we're back to Yoda, and Yoda says, you know, Darth Vader isn't, you know, your customer isn't the villain, they're the bottleneck, right? I've given you now a plan for doing this. You now know about focus, and in particular, you know about coordination and coordination, right? So I'm not going to tell you how to motivate your customer more to be involved, because my theory is that they would love to spend more time with you. It's just that they're the bottleneck and they're far too busy. You've got far too much work. So rather than motivating and selling them on how wonderful Agile is, how brilliant it is, how good it will be for them, I'm sure they kind of get all that stuff and they're probably sick of hearing it. Instead of trying to motivate them, make it easier for them. So this is the magic. This is a logistical solution rather than a motivation one. So, hang on, I'm going to come back here. No, there we go. So I'm going to go to this page now. Can I just get a hand up? Because I can now all see you all again. Can I get a hand up if you can see it across just in front of you on the screen? Good. Okay, cool. Now, I can't draw on that, which is annoying, but what I can do, because I'm very good with computers, is I can switch into mouse mode and I can mouse on it here. So I'm actually going to butcher my slides here rather than draw on them in presentation mode. So now I'm going to add in a little bit of text here. Right. Now, there's two things here. So we're now focusing on the problem. And you can use this for all situations, but just pretend that this particular one, we've found the bottleneck and it's our customer. And we know, therefore, that they're going to have a capacity kind of thing. So we've got this one here is looking at capacity. And we know that, whoa, what am I doing there? That if this is high over here, I'll just actually add it in that, just get it there, high capacity here, and low capacity here, then we know because they're at the bottleneck, they don't have enough capacity. That's fundamentally the problem. So we're going to pop them there. There's a second axis here, which I'll fill in a minute. Right. So if you want them to not be the bottleneck, you want to, watch this, this is real live animation. You want them to wander across from there and then get some point over here where they're no longer the bottleneck. So let me just, that's just the framing of the problem. You want to get more capacity from them, more time. So let's run through how you might use the focus formula to do that. So we've found them, okay, we don't want them, we want more capacity. That's our problem, great. We could optimize their time. Or we could, maybe we could coordinate differently, or perhaps we could collaborate with them, help them, and we could curate. So now I'm just going to tell you a little story here that's easily repeatable, so long as you make it situational. So this is working with a government department here in New Zealand. When I moved back here 3 years ago, I was working with the government department, and one of the senior managers there was exactly in this situation. She was the business manager. She had 10 jobs and no one could get any time with her. She had 30, 40 people working in an Agile team, and they all complained because they couldn't get enough time from her. So I got a little bit of time with her. It took me 3 weeks to get the meeting. We sat down and I just said, look, I'd like to see if I could make it easier to for you to get a little bit of time with these ones there. I want to see what they can do to make it easier for you. Okay, right. She says, well, my diary's packed out. And I said, could you just possibly, well, I'll skip over get to tell you the coordination, right? That we decided after about 10 minutes chat that she'd be really happy putting in a 30-minute slot in her diary every morning at 9:30, where she would go and sit in the office, a bookable meeting room that was right next to the team. She would sit there. The Scrum Masters would know that was her office hours for that team, guaranteed every day. So it was 30 minutes a day. And then we decided to start with just doing it 3 days a week. So an hour and a half a week, which was approximately double what the time that the team was getting already. Her reservation with that is, what if they don't turn up? And of course they did turn up, but I just said, well, do you think if you got something that you could use to do email while you're sitting in that room? And she goes, actually, gosh, if they don't turn up, that'd be fantastic. I could just use that, get through my emails rather than doing them in the evening. So she was sold. So that made it easy for her. This is the key. It made it easier by putting in a coordination solution. So just book it in her diary. Her PA did that. Book. She just had to make sure that she got there. And the teams loved it, because all of those delays they've been suffering, they soon disappeared. All of those questions that they had, they could just get answered. And she never wasted a moment of her time, and had the lovely effect that everyone in they all started actually having FaceTime with her, and they stopped thinking of her as the villain that was slowing them down, and they started to like each other. So that was cooperation. So we moved from there to there, right? Collaboration. Now this stuff will be just really obvious for all of you, but if you've got a customer and they've got a whole lot of stuff and they're really under pressure, you guys in your agile teams, your teams, they have these magnificent brains that can't do some of the stuff that the customer can, but they can do a lot of it. So they can't do all of it. They can't make important business decisions, but they can advise on those. So the collaboration is saying, well, if we're going to go to these meetings with her, why don't we all get together and come up with a few thought out things, and we'll put them in order. We'll make sure that our meetings are really efficient, which will be optimization, but we'll also look and go, our BA probably actually knows the answers and can give her advice and recommendations, rather than expecting her to think on her feet and give us these answers. So there were a whole lot of things, and you'll find this all the time, where the team can actually help the customer do the job. You may not realize this, but possibly the hardest thing, cognitively, the hardest, most calorie using thing that a person can do in a job is to make difficult decisions and to prioritize. There's a lovely book, The Brain at Work, by a guy called David Rock. He talks about this, and decision-making just drains people. So if you can make that decision-making easier by doing good prep beforehand, and maybe presenting options, well-thought options beforehand, then you can absolutely make the most of their time. And they can go, oh, I see you've thought this. Yeah, option B, go for that, but add this little bit of option A. So by pulling them in the first bit, getting a little bit of time with them, making them like it, making it feel like that it's actually good for them, saying thank you, that's great, and then turning up with stuff just makes it so much easier. This is really, this is not startling. It's just an area that we've not done very well. So that's many examples of that. So coordination is just moving timing around. You're all good at that. Collaboration, you're all good at it, and teaching people to do it inside the teams. We just need to use that collaboration, those skills we've already got, just to figure out how to build a little bit more trust and a little bit more collaboration with your external person. So the moving from there to there in my nice animation. And then the last bit is curation. Now, curation is looking at the work that comes in. So look at the work that comes in, and then prioritize it. It's effectively, that's what the customer does. A big part of it is curation. So there's one little thing I want to tell you here, and it comes back to coffee cup. This is a discussion I've had many times. It's up there in my greatest hits with the buffalo joke. I don't normally share it with people, but this startles business people, and it startles agile people, to be honest, because often they'll hear this and go, we're not doing that, and they often are. So just imagine you've got a team, they're working with a product owner. In fact, I'll go back to this lady. Her name was Jo. I told this to her boss, who was very, very senior in government. I said, look, I've looked at those teams over there, and I don't know what they're doing, but they seem awfully busy. And I'm not sure how they can be so busy. But given that they haven't got, good stuff coming in from their customer, can I tell you about the coffee problem? She goes, the coffee problem. Yes. Okay. So I happen to have, just imagine this is an espresso. I have an espresso cup here as well. So I think this is absolutely pure magic. And I said to her, look, your team out there, right? What are you trying to do with the stuff? She says, well, I've got a $20 million budget shortfall. So this automation stuff is to save jobs. Actually, I'm going to have to not recruit people or lay off people because I've got to get more efficient. Okay, right. So that's it. Yeah. So imagine you've got a cup of coffee here, right? Your cup of coffee. If the job of the coffee is to wake you up, you want the caffeine, right? Yep. I want the caffeine, right? And unfortunately, as part of getting the caffeine, you have to get the espresso, right? That's the bare minimum. Yeah, I want the espresso. Okay, so from your teams, by analogy, you want them to focus on what do they want? Productivity, efficiency, cost savings. Okay, good. What do you think they're doing? She says, well, they're doing that. That's what their job is. And I said, well, I actually don't know that it is. My impression is that they are looking at this and they're not building just espresso. They are making the super Starbucks coffee here because they see their job as building the best product. So they're building in a bit of espresso, got a bit of hot water. They've got some foamed up milk. They've got some whipped cream. They have got some syrup. They're sprinkling little bits of chocolate on it. They have, in New Zealand, for some reason, I don't know why, when you buy a coffee, they give you chocolate fish with it, which makes no sense. But I'm embarrassed to actually admit that. And they're putting a chocolate fish on the side of it. So there's a disconnect here between the outcomes that the customer wants and the product that they're building. The product people think that they're supposed to be building the best product with the best features. And that's really cool. But the customer's job is to actually go, no, the best product is actually the one that has a bit of espresso in it. And then, a lot of people don't like espresso, and it needs to have a little bit more other stuff in it, maybe a bit of sugar, a bit of milk to make it palatable. Except for that one product over there where we actually have to go for the full-blown one because that makes sense. So sorry, that's a rather long way of saying you want to make sure that your customer knows that in terms of curation, they can get a lot more value if they hunt out the espresso. They want to hunt out the espresso, and they want to make sure that the teams aren't building the best product, which is full of whipped cream and stuff like that. So I think I've overtalked that one a little bit, but there's those 3 C's in the middle is where the magic happens. You just got coordinate differently so that you make it easier for the customer to get involved. Really, really easy to do. Don't try and get them 100% all at once. If they're currently on a scale from 0 to 10, you go, actually, where are they at the moment in terms of capacity and time they give? They're 2 out of 10. All right, next week, get them to a 3. The week after that, see if you can get them to a 3.5. The month after that, see if you can get them to a 4.5. That might be enough. Go at it incrementally, which is what we're good at. The collaboration, the second C, helping. You guys have a lot of stuff in here that you can use to help, and then you make the absolute most of the limited time that the customer has, and that'll build trust with them. And then the curation, look at the stuff that's coming in, and you will find that because they're disengaged, their assumptions about what the teams are doing is probably wrong, and the teams are often, but not always, building things that the customer doesn't want. So when they become aware of that, this is where the motivation comes in. They know that they can that they can actually a little bit of their extra time will help get them get a whole lot more of what they want. Right, now I'm just going to come back to that. That's basically the plan. You know the focus formula. You know that the customer is probably the bottleneck, though you don't use that language. And if you can fix that, the amount of value that you will get pouring out of your Agile teams is enormous. And the way to do that is just to make it easier. Don't try and motivate them. And for God's sake, don't tell them how wonderful Agile is. They just see it as a pain in the ass. So make it easier. And that's it. And I will have a cup of my coffee.